So we're now going to take this one step further, and I'm going to show you how to bring in other elements to complement the text. The thing is, there's a much easier way to do what we're going to do, but I think at least showing you how to do it yourself will really improve your knowledge and build on your knowledge of this area of Premiere Pro. But it should also help you in your appreciation of it once we get to that stage. So I'm going to get rid of this nest, but before we do, I'm going to stop us having to do this all again. So I'm actually going to select pizza and Control and C. Just going to copy that because I want that element but not the nest. So I'm going to select the nest and delete. Now if I just paste what's in my clipboard now, I've got V1 selected. So watch what happens. At the playhead, Control V, and it cuts through that clip. So effectively what we've done is, for the length of we've got the pizza text in, we press play and we just have that on a black screen, and then we have that back. How do we avoid that? Well, first and foremost, we could put it here first and then copy and paste and then drag it over, which is normally what I do because it's much quicker. Or we could toggle off V1 and then Control V, and it will aim for the next available track, which is V2. Either way is fine. Just be aware of when you're pasting things onto a timeline, it can quite easily overwrite. You could also, rather than just toggling that off, you could just lock that that whole channel, that whole track, and then paste, and it'll go onto there. Whichever way works for you is fine. Just don't overwrite what we've already got and what we're trying to work on. So what do I want to do? Firstly I want to get rid of this whole animation. So we toggle off the animation, and obviously it will say this will delete all keyframes. However, note where our playhead is, and it's halfway between those keyframes. But if I press OK now with my playhead here, I now am stuck with it at this position. That's no problem because we're going to be moving it around, but just be aware that if you do delete or toggle off your keyframes and get rid of all those keyframes, whatever you're animating will be left at the point in which it is in the animation, depending on where your playhead is. I don't think that's a bug. I think that's intended, or it's just something that has been in from the very beginning of Adobe and they haven't changed it because editors have got used to it, really. It's just as simple as that. So what are we going to do with this? Well, firstly, let's just reset the position. So we're back up here, and I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. I'm going to put it down here instead, which is effectively what is known as, almost dead on. It's effectively called in the industry a lower third. Now, if you ever watch any news channels, any documentaries, anything that has someone speaking and they want to bring up their name, you'll normally see their name and maybe the title, their title, like in an organization, down here, down either the bottom left here or the bottom right here normally. And that's called the lower third because it comes up in the lower third of the screen. If you imagine this was cut into three, so there'd be a line right the way through here and the line right the way through here, which would break it up into thirds, 1, 2 and 3. This is always in the lower third. Take that a little bit further. If I bring over my rulers, my markers, my guides even, and say that's probably midway between this line and the bottom, maybe a little bit further down. So that again is in the lower third of the screen. That clear? Good. So we're going to bring this text in now as a lower third, but also with a color matte. We've played with color mattes before. We're going to take our knowledge of color mattes a little bit further. Let's just get rid of that, and let's get rid of that for now. And because we're going to be using a color matte, we don't need the background that we've included on this text. So to get rid of that, we just go back into pizza because we've got this highlighted. So we went back into pizza because that's what we're editing. And we need to scroll down and get rid of the background. So I'm just going to toggle that off. Looks all on its own now, doesn't it? So there's our text on its own. I'm also going to edit this text to have pizza time all on one line. So I might as well have it all in the same text file, text clip. So I'm going to click back into pizza and select my type tool. Don't forget, shortcut is T. And because this is aligned to the left, I know that when I text, when I add text, it's just going to come out here to the right. So if I go to the click in and go to the end and hit space and hit TIME, pizza time. Are we happy with that? I'm happy with that. I'm going to scale it down just a little actually. Now there's a number of ways we can scale down. Remember, this is effectively a vector. So we can scale down here, but I prefer to scale down true to itself. And remember, if we click, if we go back to our selection tool, our anchor point is right down here. So whatever we do with regards to scale is going to be reflected from this anchor point. So we can scale it down just by here and bring it down this way, or we can scale down with the font size. It doesn't really matter. I'm actually going to scale down with here just to make sure that we absolutely have the quality in the vectors that make up the text. I don't really think that really matters these days with regards to the anti-aliasing, like I mentioned before, because it doesn't really seem to pixelate. It looks as clear as a bell for me. But so I'm going to use this just easier because this slider is virtually all the way over here now. So this just makes it just a little bit easier. I've got a little bit more room to move. So I'm going to bring it down to, let's say, there. And because our anchor point is right down here at the bottom left, we know that that's not changed within our safe margins. If I toggle them back on, we're still within this safe margin. Good. So now what I want to do is I want to animate this in, but I want to animate a background before it for it to sit on. That's why we couldn't use the background in here, because the background sticks with the text. So instead I'm going to bring in a white color mat and we're going to play around with it so it actually fits with this. So we can animate in the color mat before pizza time comes in. How do we do that? Okay, well, first off, I want it below the text. So I need to make space below the actual graphic on the timeline. So I'm going to I'm going to click and drag this up, and I want to put a color mat underneath here. So how do we make a color mat? We go back to here into our project area, and we either hit new item and color mat, or as you know, right click, new item, color mat. And the settings are, as always, exactly what the sequence settings in, so we don't need to worry about that. We just now need to worry about the color. The default it always picks is black, the blackest of blacks. If you ever watch Father Ted, it's priest black. What we want is white, whiter than white. So let's select that and hit OK. Now in After Effects, I know I've mentioned it a number of times, but in After Effects, when you make a color mat, it's called a solid in After Effects. And whatever color you pick, it chooses the name for you. So say you've chosen kind of maybe a hue of light blue, it will come up light blue. It doesn't do that in Premiere Pro, and I'd love it to, because the amount of times where I do a color mat and I do it quickly and I hit OK and I go along, and I have like 4 or 5 color mats in here and they're all labeled color mat. I know it's you've got to, you can easily do it yourself, and that's what I'm doing, but I would much prefer for Adobe to go, yeah, okay, that's a white color mat, white mat. But once again, until they do, we've got to do it ourselves. Here's OK, and as always with everything that you create, here it is now in our project bin. So we can click and drag this in, and just like it would with an image, we are set with a certain number of frames that it's there for. However, we can make it as long or as short as we want. Okay, good. Good. So let's make it as long as the text that we've done there. Not too sure how long we want it. But as you can see, the problem here is that we're now faced with a full white screen. It's a bit too big, isn't it? So we need to size it down. There's a number of ways we can do that. We can scale it down. But as you can see, it keeps the aspect ratio of 16 by 9 because that's the sequence it was made in. So we could scale it down, and we could either use these, or we could click motion and bring it down behind it, and that kind of works. And then we could grab these handles and move it out, but again, that stays correct to the scale. We could turn off uniform scale. In fact, let me just undo and undo. We could turn off uniform scale, and then we could really size it the way we want it to, and that would work. In fact, that does work. But there's a number of other ways we could do it. So that's one way you could size your color mat. There's another way, and I'll show you now. Let's just undo all of that. And this is the way I do it. And I don't know why I do it this way, but this is the way I've learnt. So this is the way I kind of keep. And the first and foremost, what we want to do is we want to crop. So we go to Effects, and we go to our crop tool. Remember, we've done that before, and we grab it and we drag it. No, not there. Although that's correct because the mat is selected. Again, to make sure that we're dropping it onto the right clip, we drop it onto the actual color mat. And now we're given the dialog for crop. So I could just go straight ahead and I could start dragging in and making sure it works with this. However, there's a little way of helping you at this point. And to do that, we want to kind of see through this white mat just for a moment to be able to see where we are with the pizza oven footage and with the text. And for that, we're going to go back into our effects controls and deal with something we haven't dealt with before, and that is opacity. Now, the opacity on any track shows at 100% by default. It's showing all of it. However, just like with these values for position and scale, we can grab this and start to drag it down. And as you can see, that affects the opacity of the white mat. That works with everything. Let me just select that and press 0 to disable that color mat for now. And if I click into the video clip, again, we still have opacity. We can turn that up and down. So you can set the opacity of what you want. That's quite often helpful if you want something that is quite opaque and you can see through it just for a time, or you're trying to affect an adjustment layer, which again we'll deal with very soon, actually, in another section, just a little bit more on adjustment layers. But what I want to do is I just want to affect the opacity for the color mat right now. So that's currently disabled. I'm going to select it and press 0 to enable it. So we now have our color mat at 24%. So now we can see where we're at with regards to the video. We can also see, obviously, where we are with regards to the text, because the text is on top of the white mat. So with the crop tool, let's just start sliding and see where we come up with. Good, happy with that. And let's bring it in from the right a little bit. If we give it a little bit of room around there, yeah, I'm quite happy with that. We can see that right now we've got effectively a lower third. It takes up that bottom corner, and we've got the text right on top of it. So I'm going to bring back up the opacity now that I'm happy with that crop, and boom. Now what I want to do is I want to bring this color mat in from the left hand side. I want to animate that in first, and then pizza time I want to animate in. Now, the beauty of using the crop is that we don't necessarily have to move this color mat. All I need to do is I can animate the right crop from the beginning to 58% where I want it. So rather than animating and keyframing the actual position of this white mat, all we're having to do is keyframe the values of the crop effect that we've applied. Let's do that now. So I'm going to go right to the beginning of the white mat. I'm going to toggle on keyframes for the right crop. And if I drag along a little bit, I'm going to set a keyframe there. Now if I go back to the first keyframe, and the crop is currently at 58%. What does that actually mean? Well, if it was at 0, it would be all the way because there's no crop. So 58% is 58% of the distance from the right in across from right to left effectively. So what we want is we want this all the way over to here. So we're cropping 100% from right to left. Can't go any further. 100 is the maximum amount you can crop. So then we set a keyframe. Well, this keyframe is set. We want to set this keyframe as ease out, and we want to set the second keyframe as ease in. So now we've got the crop animating from left to right, from 100% right to 58% right, which is all we need to give us that. So now that that's done, I'm going to grab my pizza time, and I don't want to animate it from this point. So let's see. I want it to start coming in somewhere around here. So I'm going to drop a keyframe here for position, but I don't want to affect this movement yet. I'm not going to drag it all the way because that's my finishing point that I want. So let's play this a little bit and say there. That's where I want pizza time to finish. So I'm going to create this keyframe. I'm going to go back to the first keyframe, and let's drag it off the screen. Just off. Happy. So you know what we're doing. Right click and temporal interpolation and ease out. Right click, temporal interpolation, ease in. And that should be all we need for this animating in, both the color matte and the text. Good. Doesn't kind of work exactly how I want it to. I think maybe we need to start the pizza time a little bit earlier. Now we're right at the beginning with our keyframe, or are we? Maybe not. Let's take it all the way. Let's see if that makes any kind of difference. Not really. In fact, it makes it take longer. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm actually going to drag this clip, which not only drags the timing of the clip, but also with regards to the timeline, these keyframes will sit in a different place. Let's have a look. Good. You know what I actually want? I want pizza time to land at the same time as the crop finishes. How do I do that? Well, I click into the color matte. I get to the finishing part of the keyframe, and that's where my playhead is. Now, without moving my playhead, if I click into the text, I know the difference. If I tilde this, I can see the difference of time between that's when the crop finishes and that's where my text finishes. That's why it doesn't look quite, as nice as it could do. Let's maybe bring it a little bit closer. Maybe not the minute that the color matte stops cropping, but maybe just there. Let's see if that makes a difference. I like that. Looks good, doesn't it? Pizza time. And then we can animate it out. Just exactly the same as we did before. So how long do we want it on? That's probably about enough, isn't it? Good. So we're going to drop a keyframe here, and then we're going to play, and that's when I want the pizza time out. Isn't it great that you're literally watching me and you know exactly what I'm doing? So I'm dragging this top position value and drag it out, and I'm happy with that animation out. Good. But I'd like the crop to start coming back before pizza time is all the way out. So let's say about there. That's where I want that crop to start coming in as well. So if I leave my playhead there, it's going to the color matte. I'm going to set a keyframe. Good. And then I want this color matte to almost chase the text, so they're almost both off at the same time. So if I drag my playhead along, that's when the text is almost out. That's when it's completely out. Maybe take one more frame, and that's when I'm going to complete that crop all the way to 100%. Let's see how that goes. See how the white chases it, because the time, the yeah, the time that the pizza time text takes to get out is longer than the color matte. So effectively you then have the color matte chasing it back out. Good, I'm happy with that. There's one more thing that could make this look maybe just a little bit nicer, and that is to add something to the color matte. Now, what does the text have on it other than a fill and a couple of strokes? It has a drop shadow, and I like that. And I think a drop shadow on the color matte would also look really nice, because a drop shadow on the color matte would actually cast a shadow behind the color matte, so it would actually be effectively around here, and I think that would just give it a little bit more oomph. Let's see how it looks. So we go back up to effects, into here, and type in drop. There's our drop shadow. Drop that onto the clip that we want it on. That already looks better, but it's not a similar shadow to this, and I want to match this shadow. How do I do that? Well, we take, as you can see in effects controls, we've now got a crop effect and a drop shadow effect. Remember what I said at the beginning, that you can add loads within effects controls just to one instance on your timeline, and you can really build on this. So we're going to take the opacity all the way up to 100%, so it's now a solid black line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to offset the distance. Rather than the default of 5, I'm going to see how if I drag that up and down, it offsets that distance. I'm going to maybe take it to about, let's say 13 works for me. I'm going to keep that direction because I think that the direction is right. You see how if I move that around, it's like it starts twirling around. That's the direction that the light is coming from. And then I'm going to really just give this a load of softness, so drag that up, and there you go, boom. Now you'll have seen so many graphics on TV that have a drop shadow and maybe not notice that it's got a drop shadow. But if you look at this, and let me just turn off the effects for the drop shadow, you see the difference that that makes. Not just here, but also around the top here as well. It kind of, putting on a drop shadow, it almost gives it validity. It says, yes, I'm here, and because I'm here, I am affecting that around me. So I'm affecting the clip by casting a small shadow on there. I think shadows, drop shadows used in graphics at the right time can have just a lovely effect. So let's run that all with the animation, the text on both the animation and the color matte, and the drop shadow on the color matte. Let's have a look. Let's go from right at the beginning of that clip. And there effectively is a lower third. Easy that, isn't it? Next section, I'm going to show you how to do that in, wow, a quarter, a fifth, maybe a tenth of the time. But at least for now, you know how to do it yourself.